Good evening. I am James Pro, Executive Officer, IT and Digital Transformation for the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. In recognition of Media Literacy Week from October 24th to 28th, the OCDSB partnered with MediaSmarts to offer this virtual workshop for parents and guardians. During tonight's session, we ask you to put your questions in the Q&A and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. MediaSmarts is a Canadian nonprofit charitable organization based right here in Ottawa that focuses on digital and media literacy. MediaSmarts has been developing digital and media literacy programs and resources for Canadian homes, schools, and communities since 1996. Their work provides adults with information and tools to help children and teens develop the necessary critical thinking skills for interacting with the media they love. OCDSB regularly leverages MediaSmarts resources in the learning within our schools and classrooms. Tonight's guest speaker is Matthew Johnson, Director of Education for MediaSmarts, Canada's Centre for Digital and Media Literacy. He is the author of many MediaSmarts lessons, parent materials, and interactive resources, and a lead on MediaSmarts Young Canadians in a Wired World research project. As an acknowledged expert in digital literacy and its implementation in Canadian curricula, Matthew is the architect of MediaSmarts Use, Understand, Create Digital Literacy Framework for Canadian K-12 schools. He has contributed blogs and articles to websites and magazines around the world, as well as presenting MediaSmarts materials on topics such as copyright, cyberbullying, body image, and online hate to parliamentary committees, academic conferences, and governments and organizations around the world. Without further ado, here is Matthew Johnson.
Thank you, James, and thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Let me just tell you a tiny bit more about myself, aside from my work with MediaSmarts. So first of all, I am an OCDSB parent. So I have two sons who are both at OCDSB schools. So obviously this is something that means a lot to me. And before I started at MediaSmarts, I was a classroom teacher, including a couple of years spent at OCDSB. So I know where this is coming from both sides, and certainly a lot of the things that I'll be talking about tonight are things that we have faced as a family ourselves. I also want to mention that MediaSmarts does have hundreds of resources for teachers and parents on our website. They are all free, and they're also all available in both English and French. So if you want to explore any of the topics that we covered tonight in more detail, if you're looking for workshops, videos, tip sheets, they're all available to anyone who wants to download them or access them on the MediaSmarts website, mediasmarts.ca. Now, tonight's workshop, Explore Digital Parenting, is part of our Digital Smarts program. And that was a program that we've developed to teach practical digital literacy skills to really everyone who needs them. Tonight's, of course, is focused on parenting, but we also do have ones that are focused on everything from basic online safety to shopping and entertainment online. They are set to 3 different levels of comfort. So there are a number of them that we call the Discover workshops that are made to help people who are just getting started with digital technology. They focus on the most basic skills using the internet. The Explore workshops, such as this one, are made to help people who are already using digital technology get more out of it. They focus on building your confidence, such as tonight, your confidence, that you're making good decisions and guiding your kids when they're online, and broadening your horizons. And the Navigate workshops are made for active internet users who are running into new challenges online. They focus on helping you be a smart and safe internet user. And again, like all of our other resources, they're available for anyone to access on our website. Before we get started, I'd like you to think for a minute about what you will hope to get from this workshop. Now, Just, you don't have to answer, and we're not going to do the Q&A until the end, but just think about for a few moments. What are some things that your kids are currently doing online? What are some things that you'd like to do with them or that you hope that they would do? And what are some things that you worry about when your kids are online? It's not news. The internet can make it easier to do things like watch TV and movies, keep in touch with friends and family, and share family news. More and more, kids need to use the internet to do even their schoolwork. And of course, we saw that during the early period of the pandemic, where we really relied on the internet for school, period. It's also not surprising that a lot of parents worry about letting their kids use the internet, whether they're playing video games, watching YouTube, texting, or using social networks like Instagram or TikTok. A lot of parents feel like it's hard to keep up with what their kids are doing online. There's no right way to be a parent, online or offline, but there are some simple things that will let you help your kids when they're using the internet. All right, we're actually going to skip it. So while the internet has made being a parent harder, what kids need from us hasn't changed. That's why, even without being a technical expert, there are 5 things you can do that will help keep you on top of things. First, don't panic. Second, talk to your kids. Third, be a part of their online lives. Fourth, be the person they come to when they have problems. And fifth, set rules for them to follow and share the values you expect them to live by, online and offline. So first of all, don't be scared. It can help to think of the internet as being like a swimming pool. We know that pools can be dangerous, but we also know the best way to keep our kids safe there is to teach them how to swim, so that they can learn to keep themselves safe. Even when it comes to technology, we know from our own research, kids almost always turn to their parents for help when they have problems or questions. Even for teenagers, parents are the top source of help when they run into trouble. When they do, they're not usually coming for your help with the technology itself. What our kids need from us is guidance, so that they're ready to deal with problems before they happen, and support when things go wrong. A good example of this is how we talk to our kids about sexting. It can be tempting to use scare tactics to try to convince them not to send sexts, but not only does this not work, it can actually backfire, partly because it makes sexting seem more common than it really is, but also because if your kid's main worry is getting in trouble, they won't come to you if they have problems. Instead, we need to give our kids the guidance they need to make good decisions and make sure they know we'll be there if they need help. So, what should we tell kids about sexting? Well, first, it's not true that everybody does it. Even among older teens, fewer than half have ever sent a sext, and for younger kids, the numbers are much, much lower. We do need to make sure kids know that once a photo or a video is shared with anyone, even if you use a disappearing photo app like Snapchat, there is a chance it can be copied and could stay online forever. But even if kids know that, well, they usually think they can trust their friends or romantic partners not to share a sext. So we have to remind them that people sometimes do surprising things when they're angry or upset, like if you've just had a fight with a friend or if you've just broken up with someone. Now, if you feel comfortable, you can tell your kids about ways of safer sexting, like hiding or covering their faces or other identifying features. But what really matters is that they know not to respond to the pressure to send a sext. Encourage your kids to think about the difference between being liked for who you are and being popular, and tell them that they should never share anything online that they don't want to share. And of course, tell them to come to you if anything goes wrong. There are things that can be done if a sext gets seen by unwanted eyes. We'll come back to that a little later in the workshop. But what's more important than talking to kids about sending sexts is talking to them about not sharing sexts. While sending sexts isn't usually a good idea, it doesn't do any harm so long as they're not being used to harass someone. The harm comes when somebody shares a sext without the consent of the original sender. The problem is that a lot of kids believe that it's the sender's fault if sexts get shared, or that if a sext has already been shared, there's no harm in sharing it again. Kids who believe in excuses like these are 5 times as likely to share a sext with those who don't. That's why we need to make sure our kids know there's never any excuse for sharing sexts unless the person who sent them has clearly told you they don't mind, which does not happen very often. To help get these conversations started, we created a series of videos called There's No Excuse. Each of these is about a minute long. And each of these directly addresses one of the common excuses that we know youth use to justify sharing sexts. And there is the web address where you can access them. And I'll throw that in the chat at the end so that you can get a copy if you want. But this, again, is a great way to start the conversation. And they also come with parent tip sheets for talking about it with your kids. And there's also a lesson plan that's built around these videos. So I think I've made clear that the single most important thing is to openly talk to your kids about what they do online. Don't wait until things have already gone wrong. As soon as they start using internet devices, you need to talk to them about how you expect them to behave and what to do if things go wrong. Once you've started the conversation, keep it going. As your kids get older, new issues will come up. Your kids will start doing different things. They'll start to push boundaries. So you have to check in with them regularly. Once again, when you talk to your kids, don't try to scare them into staying safe. Whether you're trying to scare them with what might happen if they do something wrong or with what you will do to them if they do something wrong, scare tactics don't usually convince kids, especially teens. And doing it can also make them think some bad behaviors are more common than they really are. Instead, think of your kids' online lives as being like their school or the playground for their younger kids. For example, you probably already know the names of your kids' friends, and you probably already talk to them about what's going on in their classes. Well, the same should be true of their online lives. The more you talk about what they do, the easier it'll be. And if you start early, they'll be more willing to keep talking to you once they're in their teens. Do try to keep your talk positive. You want to understand what things your kids are doing online and what's exciting about it to them. So you can ask them to show you some cool things they've been doing online, what they're excited about in their latest game, or what videos they've seen that they really like. Now, you may not feel like a tech expert, but don't assume that your kids are either. Kids do learn new things quickly when they first start using a new device or a new app, but that doesn't mean they understand everything about it. A lot of times, kids learn just enough to do what they want, but they may not know what to do if things go wrong. They also don't always know how to deal with their feelings or handle problems with their friends. This can be extra hard online where you can't see or hear the people that you're talking to. That's just one of the ways in which they need the guidance and support that kids have always needed from parents. What your kids are watching, playing, and doing online is a big part of the person that they're turning into. And their online lives can be just as important to them as the quote unquote real world. Younger kids are usually glad when their parents show an interest in the things they like, so get them to show you how their new favorite game works or why they're so excited about joining a new social network. One of the questions we hear most often is, how closely should parents watch their kids when they're online? Spying on kids sends a signal that you don't trust them, which will make it harder to talk to them about what's happening in their online lives. It also means that if something goes wrong, they'll be more worried about hiding it from you than getting your help. With younger kids or with kids of any age who have shown some bad judgment, it might make sense to monitor their activities closely, but be open about the fact that you're doing it and why you're doing it. What's more effective in either case is to have kids only use the internet in a part of the house where there are other people, like the kitchen or the living room. That way, you can just look over their shoulder now and then and check in about what they're doing. Also helps keep phones and other devices out of the bedrooms so that they don't interfere with kids' sleep. Once your kids have a smartphone, of course, it's a lot harder to control where they can use the internet. Even if they don't have a data plan, they can use their phones anywhere there's Wi-Fi, like a coffee shop or a public library. If you're trying to decide whether or not to let them get a phone, the question really is whether you think they're ready to use the internet without you being there with them. If your kids already have a smartphone, it's all the more important to talk to them about what they're doing and make sure they already know how you expect them to behave. The other big question is whether and when to let your kids join a social network like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and so on. Most of these have rules that only kids 13 and older can use them, but they don't often enforce those rules. And if your kids are 10 or older, there's a good chance some of their friends are on them. Here are some questions you can ask to see if your kids have thought about why they might really want to use a social network and if they're ready to deal with things that might go wrong. Why do you want it? What do you like about it? Who would you use it to connect with? Who do you know that's already on it? How can you control who sees what you post on it? What can you do if somebody sees or shares something that you didn't want them to? And what can you do if someone is bothering you or being mean to you? Learning the answers to these questions together can be a great way to find out if your kids are ready to use a social network, and also to get those conversations started before they're using it. One thing kids should stay away from is social networks that are totally anonymous. Social networks where you use your real name, like Facebook, or ones where you make a permanent account with a fake name, are both pretty safe, so long as you use them carefully. But ones where you don't have any permanent identity are dangerous because people don't feel like what they do there will have any consequences. So we're not talking about a social network like Twitter, where you can post under a made-up name. We're talking about accounts where you don't have, or platforms where you don't have any kind of permanent identity at all. Now, kids mostly connect online with the people that they know offline. That's what they like about social networks, is being in touch with family and friends. So these totally anonymous apps don't stay popular for long. There's a long list of ones that have been briefly successful and then faded away, from Ask FM to Whisper to Omegle. But they sometimes do get very popular for a short while, so it's important kids know why they're not a good idea. The same is true with apps whose point is to connect you with people you don't already know. Kids sometimes will try these for the thrill of breaking rules against talking to strangers, but they need to know that they're likely to see things on these apps that they really did not want to see. Social networks and games can also take up a lot of time, and it can be hard to turn them off. Now, parents have been bothering their kids to turn off devices for generations, but there are some things about digital media that are different from things like TV. For one thing, you never run out of it. There's always another video to watch, another level to play, another post to respond to or like or comment on. It's also extra absorbing because in games and social networks, you're not just watching, you're playing or connecting with other people. And young people tell us in their research and in research done by other people that that's what makes it so hard to give up social networking. It's what makes it so hard to put away the phone at night. The fact that it's your friends that you're connecting with and you feel an obligation. But that's true in a lot of games as well. In multiplayer games, kids may be playing with people in completely different time zones, and they feel an obligation to help them accomplish something in the game. But all of these apps and platforms, all these social networks, all of these games, they've also all been built to keep people, especially kids, using them and coming back to them. That's how they make money. And so they are designed to get you to use them longer and to get you to use them more often. A lot of parents do worry that their kids are using screens too much. It's important to pay attention to how much time your kids are spending using screens. But most of the time itself is not a serious problem. How do you know if it is? Well, according to Dr. Michael Rich, who runs the Children's Media Center at Boston Children's Hospital, here are a few signs that it might be. First, have your kids lost interest in other things besides screen activities, particularly things that they used to enjoy? Second, do you often have trouble getting them to stop what they're doing online? And I don't mean having to tell them 3 times to turn it off and come up to dinner. I mean serious trouble. Do they get angry or upset when they can't use screens at a time they expected to? So it's that deferred gratification is one of the warning signs. If they were expecting to get to play at a particular time and you change your plans and that makes them really upset, that is a warning sign. And finally, is screen use or a particular screen activity the only thing that can cheer them up when they're feeling low? And that, for instance, is one of the reasons why doctors recommend against using screens to distract small children, especially infants and toddlers, when they're upset, because they develop the habit of expecting that and they don't learn other self-soothing techniques. But again, even older kids, even teens, even adults can become dependent on screens for that kind of self-soothing to cheer themselves up. But even if it's not a serious problem, you probably do want to take some steps to manage your kids' screen time. So what's been found to work best is not actually setting a time limit, but setting certain times and places where using screens is allowed and others when it isn't. Now, I should clarify that I'm talking about school-age children. With very young children, particularly children under 2, it really is important to give them as little screen time as possible. And that's not because there's anything bad about screens. It's because children at that very young age need things that screens don't give them. They need to interact with other people. They need to explore the world around them. They need to experience smells and tastes and sounds and sights that they just don't get from screens. And so it is, again, not that screens by themselves are bad for young kids, it's that they prevent them. The time that they spend with screens is times when they're not getting those other things. So that doesn't mean that it's, of course, that it's going to do, permanent harm to your 18-month-old if they watch a video for a few minutes while, you're making dinner or having a shower. But if you make a habit of it, then it is taking up time when they should be doing other more stimulating things. So that's small children. But with older kids, with school-age kids, even kids in the 3 to 5 range, you're more thinking about developing healthy screen habits, and having times and places where screens are allowed and others where it isn't is a good way of doing that. One of the things we strongly recommend, and I mentioned it earlier, is keeping screens out of kids' bedrooms. But you can also say they aren't allowed during family activities, like at meal times or when you're all out doing something all together. And I will tell you that sometimes kids appreciate our being the bad guy. Because again, when they're unable to put away the phone at bedtime, a lot of that is social obligation. It's feeling that their friends will be upset. If my friend posts a photo and I don't like it, my friend will be upset at me. Or if they post something asking for encouragement and I don't respond to it with that encouragement, they'll be disappointed in me. And so sometimes we have to be the ones who give our kids the excuse, oh, I'm sorry, but my mean parents make me put my phone away at night. And so that's why. It wasn't that I wasn't, don't be upset. It wasn't that I, didn't like your photo. My mean old parents locked it away. But we do know from research that a lot of the time kids appreciate it when we do that. More than limiting screen time, try to steer kids to positive screen activities. This can mean activities that they do with other people, especially if the people are in the same place they are. So for instance, playing video games together with a friend instead of alone. Those are two very different experiences, particularly when you have the two people in the same place. Then it becomes a social experience. It becomes something you're doing together with a friend that just happens to involve a screen. Activities that make you move, whether it's exercise games like Ring Fit or Dance Dance Revolution or Just Dance, or even Jump Rope Challenge, which is actually a free game you can download for the Switch, or things that get you outside like geocaching or Pokemon Go. Creative activities like making your own videos, like doing animation or stop motion, and educational activities. Of course, CBC, PBS, and other public channels have lots of educational games on their websites, and there are also great games and apps that can teach everything from math to coding. It's also important to pay attention to what's in the things your kids are watching and playing online. YouTube is the most popular app or website for kids of all ages, but there are a lot of things on it that you don't want them to watch. If your kids do watch YouTube, the most important thing is to make sure you've turned off autoplay. If it's switched on, the next video in the list will automatically play after the current one is done. Now, that's not always a problem when it's just one more Minecraft video, though it does make it harder to tell kids it's time to stop. But sometimes videos can lead to unexpected places. So there's the autoplay toggle. Even though it's on the video control, if you switch it off once, it'll stay off.
So Matthew,
Yeah.
we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, I'm not. How long? Okay, you're not. I'm not sharing anymore.
No.
For how long?
Been a while, but it's okay.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, I'll set that up again. Okay, here we go. Well, okay, so let me go back to. That's weird. All right. Okay, so let me go back just to show you the toggle. Okay, so that was the important one, is to show you where the toggle is on the screen there. So as I say, if you just switch that so that it looks like that, you just slide the toggle so that it turns gray. Now, if you have a Google account and you're signed in, you'll only have to do it once. If you don't have a Google account, you'll have to do this step on every device and browser that your child uses. Another useful thing you can do if you have a Google account is to turn on restricted mode. And so you can see, you click on the little picture of you or your account up at the top, and at the very bottom of that pop-up menu is switching to restricted mode, on or off. Restricted mode keeps YouTube from playing videos that might not be appropriate for kids, and it also hides the comment section. You can turn it on again by clicking on your profile picture and then changing restricted mode to on. On a phone or tablet, you'll need to tap your profile picture, tap settings, then general, and then slide restricted mode to on. And again, if you want to see this, I understand this will be recorded. And also if you want to download these slides so you have these screenshots, they're available on our website. Two other things you'll want to know about relating to YouTube are channels and playlists. Because anyone with a Google account can post on YouTube, it's useful to find creators and channels that you know won't have inappropriate content. So we click on the name of the account to see all the videos that they've posted. A lot of well-known TV shows like Sesame Street and broadcasters like CBC Kids have their own channels. If you don't know anything about a channel, you can scroll through the videos and watch a few with your kids to make sure they don't have anything you don't want them to see. You can also create playlists in YouTube so that your kids can only watch videos that you've chosen ahead of time. And that can be a really useful thing with younger kids. This can be a bit more work, but it's the surest way to keep them from finding something that you don't want them to watch. To add videos to a playlist, start by clicking the like button. That's the little thumbs up under the title. If you're using YouTube on a laptop or a desktop computer, you can tap the 3 bars at the top right and click Show More. Then click Liked Videos to see the list of videos that you liked. So next, we click the 3 dots at the right and click Save to Playlist. Now we can create a new playlist. We can call this one Arthur, since it's for episodes of that TV show. And we can choose whether we want our playlist to be private, which means only you can see it, public, which means that anyone can see it, or unlisted, which means you can send people a link to see it. So you can create playlists and share them with other parents. Once we've created a playlist, the next time we want to add a video, we can just click on that playlist. So it gets easier once we've done that initial work of creating the playlist. If we're doing it on a mobile device like an iPad, we can't add kids' videos to specific playlists, but videos that you've liked are automatically saved to a playlist called liked videos. So you can create a playlist on a mobile device, just we can only create a single playlist. But it's still only videos that you've chosen. You can see this in any other playlists you've created by clicking on Library. That means that you can make playlists when you're using YouTube on a computer and then watch them on a mobile device later. All right. So we're gonna do a quick quiz. Obviously, you can't answer, so you're just going to answer for yourselves what you think is the right answer, but we're just going to see how much you remember. We've covered a lot already. So first of all, why is spying on kids online not usually a good idea? Is it because it tells them you don't trust them? Because it makes them worry more about hiding things from you than fixing things that went wrong? Because they can get around spy software? Or is it all of those? And you probably guessed that it is all of those. Using spy software doesn't replace talking to your kids about what they're doing online. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's never a time when you might monitor what your kids are doing, but in general, it's not a good strategy. All right, our second question. You probably shouldn't give your kids a smartphone until they can afford to pay for data themselves, they're ready to use the internet without you watching them, you're sure they won't lose the phone, or all of the above. Take a second to think what you think is the right answer. And here's the answer. It's hard to watch what kids are doing with a smartphone. You really can't look over their shoulder like you can even with a laptop or a tablet. So you need to be sure that they know how you expect them to behave online. And one of the things that the research we've done shows us is that in most cases, kids don't get their first phone because they asked for it. They get their first phone because their parents gave them one. And usually their parents gave them one to be able to keep in touch with them. Now, sometimes that makes perfect sense. And it makes us feel a lot more secure if we know our kids have a way of reaching us. But we do have to keep in mind that when you give your kids a phone, you're giving them a way of accessing the internet more or less completely without supervision. And so it's really important that they are clear on how you expect them to behave. All right, next question. What's more useful than trying to limit how much time kids spend online? Is it making them earn screen time by doing chores? Making them earn screen time by getting exercise? Steering them to non-screen activities? Or steering them to positive screen activities? And here's our answer. Not all screen time is created equal. We want to give to kids more time for activities that are social, active, creative, or educational. Of course, you still want to keep a lid on total screen time, And you can also limit screen time by saying screens aren't allowed at certain times and places, like at meal times or in bedrooms. And you do want to do non-screen activities with them, of course, and encourage non-screen activities. But generally, having them earn screen time is not a great idea. It can tend to backfire because it makes they can game the system in some cases. And also it makes screen time seem that much more desirable as a thing itself rather than a thing that you do for a particular reason. And what is the difference between a YouTube channel and a YouTube playlist? Is it that a channel has all of a YouTuber's videos in one place, while a playlist is a list you make of videos to watch? Is it that a playlist has all of a YouTuber's videos on one place, while a channel is a list? So it's the opposite of one. Is it that a channel is free while you have to pay to view a playlist? Or is it that a channel can have ads while a playlist can't? And here's our answer. A channel has all of a YouTuber's videos in one place. And sometimes it can be a specific person who has their own channel, or as I say, sometimes it can be something like Sesame Street, or it could be TVO. There are lots of YouTube channels, but they have all of creators' work, all of videos of a particular account in one place. Whereas a playlist, you make yourself. And you can make a playlist from someone's channel, or you can make a playlist that combines channels, or you can make a playlist just of videos that you found all over the place. Now, a lot of the time, kids don't want to go to their parents when things go wrong because they're afraid that they'll get in trouble. We want to make sure our kids know they should come to us if things go wrong, like if they can't figure out a game or if they accidentally access something unpleasant. If they're in the habit of coming to us about the little things, they'll be a lot more likely to talk to us about the big ones. If your kids come to you with a problem, take it seriously. What happens online can be just as real and significant as what happens offline. While bad decisions can be a good learning opportunity in the future, when your kids first come to you, it's important to be supportive and to reassure them that you're on their side, or they may not come to you next time. Of course, it's best to be ready to help when they come to you. MediaSmarts has many parent resources like tip sheets, guides, and videos to help. For example, our tip sheet, Help, Someone Posted My Photo Without My Consent, gives advice on how you can get an unwanted photo taken down. It also explains how the law protects people who have had sex shared without their consent. Now, it's okay to tell kids to take a break, but most of the time, you don't want to take away their phones, make them stop playing a game or stop using a social network completely. Games and social networks are a big part of kids' lives, so telling them to stop going online is like telling them to shut down their social lives. It'll also make them feel like they're the ones who are being punished, so it's really only appropriate when they're the ones at fault. For example, if they've been seriously and repeatedly mean or cruel to someone online, if they've shared an intimate image of someone without that person's consent, or if they've used a digital device to commit a crime, such as hacking or posting hate material. But really, it's only in these extreme situations where you want to take away the device for an extended period. Remember that most kids spend time online with the same kids they see offline. A lot of the drama that they get involved in spreads over both worlds. Once your kids are on social networks or connecting with people in other ways online, like in games, tell them to come talk to you if anybody is mean to them. What's best, though, is to set clear rules so your kids know how you expect them to behave online. It may seem like the internet is a place where rules don't apply, but the rules you set for your kids still affect how they behave online. Your rules don't have to be just punishments for doing bad things. What's more important is to use them as a way of helping your kids understand the values you want them to live by. Now, it may be hard to believe, especially if you have teens, but kids generally want the adults in their lives to set limits and help them tell right from wrong. We've been doing research on teens and digital technology for 21 years now, and we've found consistently that having rules in the home does have an effect on how kids behave. And when you do it, when you use rules as a way of communicating your values to them, that way they'll keep living them by them, even when you're not around. And of course, when they're grown up and out on their own, because that's what we want. We want them to become independent users of this technology. We want them to have their own moral compass. So we do need to make sure that our kids understand that the result of these rules is trust. If you know that they understand and will follow the rules that you've negotiated together, you'll be able to trust them more. Remember, whether you're talking about treating people with respect or keeping screen time under control, what we do sends a more powerful message than anything we say. Now, not every internet rule has to apply to everyone in the house. It does make sense for adults and older kids to follow different rules from young kids, but we do have to pay attention to the messages our kids get by watching us. So if we have a rule, for instance, against using devices at the dinner table, then it really is best if everyone follows that rule. And if you have to make an exception, explain why you're doing it. So you can say, for instance, maybe it's lunchtime and you're going to go out all together in the afternoon and you want to know, is it going to rain? Should we go to the museum? Should we go to the park? Should we bring umbrellas? So you say, excuse me, because you're breaking a rule, excuse me, I'm just going to use my phone to check the weather. And you do the thing that you said you were going to do and you put it away. And that way, first of all, you're saying, yes, there are times when we don't follow the rules exactly, but we do it consciously and mindfully. And we use it as a tool. And when we're done with it, we put it away. So you really are modeling the kind of behavior that you want to see from them. Now, with younger kids, it makes sense to just explain the rules that you expect them to follow. As they get older, they're a lot more likely to follow rules if they've been involved in making them. Before you renegotiate rules as kids get older, ask them some questions to find out which of the old rules they still remember. Like, do you feel like you know what things we expect you to do and not do when you're online? And do you know what to do if things go really wrong? So we'll do another quick quiz. Why is it important to tell kids to come to you if anything goes wrong online? So you know if they did anything bad. So they'll ask you for help if something goes wrong. So they know they'll never get in trouble for what happens. Or so you can fix things right away if something goes wrong online. And here's our answer. If your kids are in the habit of coming to you when little things go wrong, they'll be more likely to talk to you about the big ones. You can't tell them that they'll never get in trouble because they might. And you won't always be able to fix things right away. But so long as they know they can come to you for help, that sometimes you may have to help them fix a mistake if they were the ones in the wrong, but you will help them. You will have their back. And if it means helping them fix a mistake, then that's what you're going to do. Which of these is a good reason to take away a device or internet access in general? If they've been seriously and repeatedly mean to someone, if they've downloaded an app without telling you, if they've broken your screen time rules, or if they've watched a video you don't think is appropriate for kids. You really should only take a device away if your child has done something seriously wrong. So downloading an app definitely should be against the rules, but unless it's an app that in and of itself you think is a really bad thing, unless they've intentionally downloaded malware or something really inappropriate, that calls for discussing the rules, maybe a lesser consequence. Same thing with screen time rules. If they've watched a video you don't think is appropriate, that may call for a conversation, but at the same time, it's very easy for things to come up. If you haven't turned off autoplay, or if they're looking at the up next bar or the For You page on TikTok, it's very easy for these things to come up without them meaning them to. What's the most important thing for rules about using the internet? Is it that they're clear about how kids will be punished, that they apply equally to everyone in the family, that they get across the values you expect your kids to live by, or that they cover everything that might go wrong when your kids go online? Now, most kids especially teens, aren't actually that worried about getting punished. In fact, no one is less worried about getting punished than teens. Research into sexting found that kids in places where sending sex is against the law for teens, kids in those places who knew that it was against the law were actually slightly more likely to send them than kids that didn't know it was against the law. But kids do care about right and wrong. They really do, especially teens. So getting across those values, getting across what is expected and also what is normal. And they're all, teens especially, are very strongly influenced by what they think is normal. And that's why it's so important not to make bad behaviors seem more common than they really are. And of course, your rules aren't always going to apply to everyone equally, and they're never going to cover everything that might go wrong. And our last question for this quiz: what sends the most powerful message to kids about how you expect them to behave online? Is it what rules you set for them? What punishments you set for breaking those rules? Whether your kids think you can trust them, or, you probably already guessed this one, yes, how you behave online. Of course, it is important to set rules. It's important to have conversations. It's important to share your values. Sometimes it can be important to let them know what the consequence is going to be, but really your own behavior sends a stronger message. We as parents send the strongest message with how we behave. So we've almost done this workshop. In fact, that does bring us to the end of the workshop, and we have a little bit of time for questions. So feel free to put them in the Q&A.
So Matthew, we have your first question here. It says, can you put up the list of questions to
Sure.
ask kids about their online activity? It was in 15 minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
So we do cover a lot in this. Now, once again, this workshop is being recorded, and also you can download the slides from the workshop from our website, MediaSmarts.ca. But here is the slide that our first questioner was asking about. So these are the questions that you can ask. I'll just leave those up while we take the other questions. All right, getting lots of good questions in now.
Okay, so the next question is, what do you think of apps that set time limits?
All right, so those can be really useful when you use them as part of a plan that you and your children have discussed together. So they're great as a reminder. They're great, for instance, to give a warning before you're going to start doing something else. So if you've decided that a certain period of the day, let's say on the weekend, is when your kids are allowed to have free time on screen devices, then having one of those apps that warns them a little bit of time before you change is going to be a really valuable way of helping them make that transition. They also can be really valuable in helping everyone in the family take stock of your screen time habits, because one of the first things that we need to do in managing our use of screen devices is understand what we're currently doing, recognize the patterns, recognize when we're using it, how much we're using it, and sometimes just saying, we're not going to change anything right now, but we're just going to turn on this app that tracks how long we spend doing different things. It's sort of like a budgeting exercise where you keep track of what you spend for a month, and then you realize, wow, we really did spend a lot of money on chips or whatever, and you say, okay, maybe we shouldn't get so many chips. It's very much the same thing. You identify when you're spending time on screens, what you're doing with them. So really, they're most useful as a way of becoming more mindful about your screen use.
So the next question is about, can you please show the website you've been referring
Okay.
to? And I think that's the MediaSmarts one they're referring to.
Yes. So I can put the, I'm going to just put the website in the chat. Or I guess I can't put it in the chat.
We can answer, we can put the answer, maybe Kristen, if you could put the website, the answer in the answer there.
Yeah. Oh, I can do it right here. There we go.
Okay.
So here it is. So that's mediasmarts.ca. And if you want to see anything on there in French, there's a button to see different things in French. And I can also put up, there is, to wrap up, and I'll come back to it in a second, a little worksheet that helps you get started with coming up with household rules if you haven't done so yet. And I will put that in the chat as well. There we go. Or in the.
So the next question is suggestions for limiting screens just before bed to help with a good night's rest.
So, you know, the best advice really is to come up with some other kind of transitional activity. So it really depends a lot on how old your kids are. So with younger kids, obviously doing something like reading a book together rather than having screens in the room. With older kids, you might have them read on their own, or you could, for instance, have them listen to an audio book if, you know, maybe they're not into reading with you anymore, or if it doesn't fit into your schedule for whatever reason. And what really helps with bedtimes is to have a routine and a ritual. So it's going to be rocky if kids are used to taking their devices with them or having devices going at bedtime. It is going to be rocky when you first start saying, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. But if you develop a routine, if you develop a ritual, if you say, okay, now all of us we're going to put our phones or whatever in this basket and we're all going to go and read or whatever it is, then over time, that's just going to become what you do.
Okay, so the next question, are there kids who are more vulnerable to falling prey or engaging in sexting or cyberbullying?
So the research is still ongoing in a lot of those cases. With cyberbullying, we know that it's basically exactly the same kids who are vulnerable to cyberbullying who are likely to be targeted with offline bullying. LGBTQ2S kids, kids who are in a minority, an ethnic minority or a religious minority in the place where they are, kids with disabilities, kids, basically kids who stand out in some way, kids who are vulnerable to their peers in some way, are more likely to experience cyberbullying in the classic sense. That is where it is other people who are repeatedly picking on them, who are repeatedly hurting their feelings. But we also know that a lot of cyberbullying doesn't happen like that. A lot of cyberbullying is reciprocal, that it goes back and forth. And so we know that many kids who are targets of cyberbullying are kids who have been cyberbullies themselves. So those are the other ones who really are at risk. Kids who have very little ability to manage their emotions. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of our material about cyberbullying is about helping kids to recognize their emotions and helping kids to manage conflict. When it comes to sexting, we're still studying really who is more likely to send sexts. And we don't really have good answers there, but we do know some things about kids who share sex. And again, that is really where the harm comes. I'm never going to say it's a good idea for teenagers to be sending sex. That's not a good idea, but they're not harming other people. Where the harm really comes is when those are shared without consent. And what we do know is that it is kids who, first of all, who are able to make excuses about it, what we call moral disengagement, and that's what those videos and tip sheets I mentioned are aimed at. But it's also kids who have traditional gender stereotypes. So kids who have very traditional ideas about men and women and boys and girls and sexuality. They are kids who strongly believe in those stereotypes are 5 times more likely to share a sext without consent than kids who have low belief in those stereotypes. And so that's why we do have to talk. It's why media literacy, it's why talking to our kids about stereotyping, talking to our kids about telling them that no matter what someone does, it doesn't give you a right to share their photo or video without consent. Making sure they understand that clearly is so important.
Okay, so next question. So if your kids are showing signs of too much screen time, is it a good idea to simply cut it back, or should you remove it completely for a period of time before reintroducing it to more moderate amounts?
I wouldn't remove it completely because that does feel very much like a punishment for kids. And if they're spending a lot of time on screens, they're not necessarily doing it for a bad reason. They're doing it because they enjoy it. So finding ways of cutting it back and also helping them to prioritize, again, more positive uses. So helping them, for instance, to find enthusiasms so that they're not just, if they're older kids, they're not just, scrolling on social networks. If they're younger kids, they're not just playing video games or playing on an app, that they're starting to think more of this device as a tool that we use for a particular reason at a particular time.
Okay, next question. What is the most effective methods to encourage a 7-year-old to respect screen time limitations?
I would say that with a 7-year-old, routine is absolutely the most important thing. So again, with a 7-year-old, they're very, very responsive to having routines. So simply say, okay, these are the times when you can use screens. You might say, these are the times that are free play. This is the time when you can do anything appropriate with a screen. These are the times when I'm going to let you do creative things or educational things or active things. And these are the times and places where we're not going to do screens at all. And the other thing that's really important for a 7-year-old is that you're replacing it with something else. You're not just saying, get off the device. You're saying, okay, and we're going off the device now, and we're going to do this instead. We're going to go outside. We're going to go to the museum. We're going to go have a play date with your friend. But you're not just leaving that gap, and you're not making it feel like a punishment, because at age 7, they really are sensitive to feeling like they're being punished.
Hey, so next question. Should we ask our teenagers to show us their chat groups from time to time so we can see that their language and content is not inappropriate, or even show us who they're chatting to? In my opinion, if my 14-year-old son is spending an hour every day in a group chat with inappropriate content and acquaintances, I would rather he do something else. But if he's chatting with his real friends, that is fine.
So I think it is reasonable to ask your kids who they are chatting with. And you can ask them to show you, like, so who is it? Who's that screen name? And who is that really? I wouldn't recommend forcing them to let you read everything they do, because what they're simply going to do is they're going to make they're going to make a second account. And when you ask them to show it to you, they'll show you the squeaky clean one, and they'll have something going on a different account. And then if something goes wrong with that other account, they won't want to come to you because they've hidden it from you. But if it's part of a conversation, in the same way that if you see, oh, that's someone, you see your kids walking home with a friend you didn't know, and you say, oh, who's that? How did you meet them? Or which classes are they in with you? And it's exactly the same way. You want to know who they're with, and you also want to make sure that they understand that talking to someone that they don't know offline is very different from talking to someone that they do know offline. That if it's part of continuing a friendship that they have offline, then you may prefer that they did it in person, but it's very much part of an offline relationship, whereas you do need to be a lot more cautious. You do need to be a lot more conscious if they're talking to people that they don't know, even if it's in a context like a game where they're unlikely to have any kind of continuing contact, but you still want to know if they're talking to anyone that they don't know of in real life.
Hey, I think we're just over time now, so I'll hand it back over to James to sum up.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you very much, Sandy and Matthew. I really liked the part of your 5 steps, but out of those 5 steps, the one that resonated with me is be the person that your child comes to. So working on that effectively really resonated with me, as well as the swimming analogy. I thought that was pretty important. Like, you wouldn't send your child in swimming without giving them some guidance and some help. And so that's a very good analogy. And, I say this all the time. You mentioned this, be careful what you're sharing online because it can stay there forever. So that guidance to children at any age is important to know. And never, one thing that I never thought of, never share online if you feel pressured to share online. So that is really good advice. And, MediaSmarts.ca, there's lots of material there. So I encourage everyone to go visit this. And, this was a very great presentation. So thank you, Matthew. It was very informative, and obviously lots of questions. We could probably go on for half an hour. And finally, I was very happy to see that Arthur is still watched out there. So thank you very much for your time, Matthew. This was a great session, and we love partnering with MediaSmarts. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for coming out.
And we'll make sure we follow up by sending out the links to your slides and your website so that people can have further look at them.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening, and thanks for your participation.
Thanks so much.